Okay, today we're going to harvest from my mini flow-through worm bin. Depending on the system you're using, harvesting from a worm bin can be, easy or challenging. That's one of the main advantages of pretty much all the different types of flow-through worm bins, because on all the different types you feed from one end and harvest from the other end. So the worms tend to go where the food is and away from where all the food has already been eaten up, and that's where you harvest from. Um, this one, I mean, is small for a flow-through worm bin, but it still works. I always feed on this end. You can see some of the things I fed them last time sprouted because it's that time of year. And then here on the other end is kind of, if we take a closer look here, this is all the stuff that's already been fed. When we get to the other side where the food is, you'll see worms everywhere. Here you still see occasional worms, but the vast majority of my worms are not in here. I'll pull the worms I see out, but if some of the worms leave my bin and go into the garden, that is, I am perfectly a-okay with that, as long as I'm not decimating the worm population, which I know I'm not. There's only just a couple here. There's actually two different things I do to get the worms to move out of here. One is that I leave it. It's not only one is that I don't feed over here, so there's not much food for them to get. The other thing I do is I leave it uncovered, so it dries out a little bit more than the rest. It's still not that dry, which is why I'm seeing more worms here than I usually do. So today I'm just gonna harvest a little bit, and I'm gonna let it dry out a little bit more. I mean, that's still a good amount. It'll feed some of my cucumbers that I got growing. And I'm gonna leave the rest here just because, there's still some worms here. So I'll give them a chance to leave because I'm gonna make it less inviting. So I'm just going down here, down to the bottom, fluffing up all the castings. Also, it's been hot a few of the days, so that also is one of the reasons why the flow through doesn't work quite as well, because where the food's breaking down, that also generates heat. So if they're trying to find a way to escape the heat, the finished castings are usually the coolest part of the bin, which might explain why I'm seeing much more than usual of them over here. Which, might be a good thing for the health of my worms, give them a cool refuge to run away to. So I'm not too worried about harvesting all the castings out of here. I'm gonna go and just fluff it up. I mean, there's a lot of stuff ready to be harvested. I'll have to get onto that sooner than later. But I'm gonna make sure not to add too much water here. Because I want to make sure that this is not the most, you don't want to encourage them to come over here. This is where I want them to leave so that I can take some of this stuff out. I am seeing so many tiny little baby worms, which I love. This is like the first year I've got a good number of these. I just it took me a little while to figure out a good way to do this and care for them, care for all my worms, and seeing all the little worms running around everywhere tells me that I'm like kind of starting to get it right. Yeah, you can see here when we get over the food, there's the big worms, and there's just as much worms as anything else. They're all stacked up. I'm gonna go through, fluff this, stack it up next to, but not onto the finished castings. And then as I go through and I fluff it up, any of the big food chunks like the avocado that they've been doing well on, but they haven't quite finished, I'm gonna throw that over the side so it has more time to go through. And then continue fluffing. Ooh, yeah, this is where I fed last time. Like, whew. See, this is the difference between the feeding side and the the finished casting side. I mean, the finished casting had some worms, but this has a lot. Just all living their best worm life. Yeah, this is where the vast majority of them are, which is why a few of them come out of the finished side into the garden. I'm not too worried about it because most of my worms are over here. Won't hurt my worm population much. I'll still go through everything I put in here just as fast. Okay, so that's all of it. What I usually do is throw some of the finished stuff down just to seed it with the good bacteria that I have in here that the worms like to eat. Then on top of that, I put my castings up, or the bedding on. Sorry, there's the worm bedding. And then I always like to break up the coffee from the weekend here. So here's my espresso grounds. And just break up all the pucks and mix it into the bedding. So get this all mixed up. This is a good baseline thing to feed them so that they always have something to eat, even if I don't go through that much. A good thing to add, if you think of it, is to break up some eggshells and throw these in here. These are just good calcium for your garden, as well as an aggregate that helps the worm eat their food. And then I'm going to throw in my kitchen scraps from the week. So these are pretty wet this week. I'm going to fill in, mix it up with some of the previously eaten stuff. I'm going to throw those back over here. Just because it's so wet, I'm going to add a little bit more bedding. There we go. You can almost never add too much bedding. If you come in, you've added a lot of bedding and not a lot of wet food, you might see that everything's gone a little dry. It's not the case here. If anything, I wouldn't mind it to be a little bit drier, which is one of the other reasons why I'm adding so much bedding. All right, last thing to do each week is I tuck them back in, leaving the finished castings uncovered because once again I want those to dry out, so I leave this uncovered. And then once that's all done, I go ahead and close it all up. Keep the moisture in, keep the critters out, and that's it.